All right, good evening, everybody. I hope you are having a nice day. I hope that there was some sun shining in your neck of the woods today. Smiley faces, if you can hear me all right. And how about some indication about the weather in your neck of the woods? How are things? Cold, rainy, snowy, sunny? Oh, awesome. Oh, my goodness, sunny and great. Wow. Okay. Lisa and I wanted to bring up the schedule for our course, and there's a couple of weird little things. And so the University of Alaska Anchorage last day of class is May 2nd. Kodiak College, Kenai Peninsula College, and Mat-Su all have the final class day as May 4th because of Martin Luther King Day or Alaska Civil Rights Day that was back in January, so that every class gets an equal number of sessions. However, we do have the ability to shorten our class by 1 week. And so Lisa and I talked about this quite a bit over the weekend, and what we thought we could do is let you guys think about this. Right now, the way things that are set up is that there's kind of a 2-week window for you to prepare your final presentation that you do through a VoiceThread, and we could shorten that to a 1-week window, and we could, and our final class could be on the 27th of April. Is this making sense so far? Green checks if that's making sense, red X's if it's not. Okay, all right. I'm going to go ahead and clear those checks. Now, what we decided is that we could only actually make the change if everybody agreed. So if it was a unanimous decision, because some of you may have made plans in sort of some sort of other way, or you may really, really want there to be 2 weeks to work on that presentation. So I think we need to let you guys think about it a little bit, and then actually go ahead and everybody type in the instant message box if you feel like you know how you want to vote, or you feel like you'd like to think about it for a week and we can vote on it next week at the beginning of class or at the end of class or something. All right. All right, so we will now, now you guys know that it's coming next week, probably just before your presentations. We will ask you, and again, it will need to be unanimous in order for us to make the change, because it wouldn't be fair for us to do it otherwise. But if everybody wants to switch, then we can switch. So, okay, thanks for that, you guys, and now we can get started.
All right, so we wanted to start off today by having everyone go down the list. So I'm going to give you a heads up so you can think about it for just a minute. And this slide just summarizes some of the different resources we gave you to look at this last week. And so we're hoping you can go down the list, go down the list of everybody who's here today, and just give us a little bit of an idea what stuck with you the most from these resources. If there's anything that you made a personal connection with, if there's anything you really came away with that you were surprised about or had no idea was the case. And so just to trigger your memory are these different resources, those different topics we looked at this last week in the asynchronous and in the reading. And so I'm going to go ahead and ask Audrey, I'm going to put you on the hot seat first, and go ahead and just take the mic. Give us a quick feedback. We're going to spend about 5 to 8 minutes on this, and then we'll just go down. Oh, sorry, there's Alicia, I'm going to give you a little bit of extra time on this because I'm going to have everybody go down the list and give something that stuck with them from the week's resources. So Alicia, you'll actually be last in line, and we're going to start with Audrey and go from Audrey to Brent. Go ahead, Audrey.
One thing that stuck to me was about the Google reading. It's so easy to get caught up in your own life that you forget that there's this whole other world out there, and how much Google actually plays a part in that world. So that's one of the things that really stuck with me.
I was thinking a lot about Moore's Law, about how rapid technology advances, but then also how we're kind of being forced to find new technologies in order to keep up with with that exponential growth of Moore's Law. And then also I thought a lot about medical records, laser computers, exactly. My wife went to get an MRI, and she had to sign a waiver, and the the gal at the desk says to her, "Here, you need to sign this, but it's 12 pages. So you can sign it right here, or you can go and read all the 12 pages." So I thought it was quite interesting based on our last week's conversation about medical records and privacy and those things.
Yeah, I agree with Brent that the medical records thing it's still something that sticks with me because I find it so such a personal topic. And yeah, like signing things, and even if your wife had wanted to sit down and read those 12 pages, it would have been full of such big mumbo jumbo scientific words that even if she had tried to sit down and read it, she probably wouldn't have understood a lot of it. And so that to me is a big thing, because I want to be able to understand what I'm signing and why I'm signing it, and I feel like I should be able to have that knowledge and that access to my own medical records.
The material that stuck out to me the most this week was Glenn Greenwald. I actually ended up watching it, and my husband is right there, and he actually got pulled into watching it with me. And then I didn't realize the connection between Glenn Greenwald and Edward Snowden, and so I ended up researching that, and it just got me kind of more fired up about surveillance and privacy and how it's kind of being violated and how we really need to protect it.
I was kind of along the same lines as everybody else, where I think about where technology is going in the future. So I really like the one on Moore's Law, and I often find myself thinking about that when the new computer comes out or the new, iWatch comes out and stuff, and I often think about what we're going to be able to come up with next, but also at the same time, are we running out of resources to be able to produce all this stuff, and what's going to happen if we do run out of those resources?
What really stood out to me was the little blog post with the ethics article. I thought it was pretty cool how they were able to just fund on their own, and people were able to contribute even though they weren't 100% sure what they were contributing to, but they were really invested in all of that.
What really stood out to me was the analytics video we had to watch, because it's always been something I was wondering how it worked and whatnot, but it really showed how it worked in a business world, and it was easily relatable to the other videos.
The one that really stood out to me was the medical records one. I just thought it was really interesting and kind of scary to have everyone's DNA on a government database, but then I could also see all the benefits that could come from it. So that's one that really stuck with me.
Yeah, I was kind of on the same boat. It was Glenn Greenwald and the medical records, one of the ones that really spoke to me. I kind of combined the two of this mass surveillance, and then we read about or listened to the thing about that. What was it called? The Mini Sentinel, where they're taking Mini Sentinel, where they're taking information from our the medical codes. And even though we sign HIPAAs all the time, and we probably don't read them, now I want to go back and find one and see if it actually says we might sell your information to some company. Because I would have thought by signing that they couldn't give anything away, but I've obviously am wrong. So.
I also really liked the ethics article. What stood out to me a lot was they talked about blind objectivity, and I know, like, when we talked in class last time, what my mind goes straight to is how it could help other people, and of course I would do this because it may help someone else, but what you don't realize, the article really pointed out, like, how we could be hurting someone else or the pain that they're feeling, and it kind of got you thinking.
The medical records one also stood out to me, just how people can't seem to agree on whether it's ethical or not to be using these people's information. And like, while it could benefit some, it's also not right
for the privacy of others.
I liked the Moore's Law video because it was really, the guy presented it really well and it made sense to me in a way that it hadn't before. And I also liked Glenn Greenwald's presentation about privacy and things like that. So it was really interesting.
I was thinking about how dangerous it is to have really big, massive data storage spaces like that giant lab, mostly due to the fact that the large-scale breaches are becoming more and more common. Like Blue Cross Blue Shield had their entire record database stolen within this past year, and all their insurance clients' information got stolen, their medical records, all of that, and it wasn't hard to do. And that relates to Moore's Law, and that technology is you can store more and more on smaller hardware, and that's only going to make the amount of data they can store in one place and target all at once more and more so. So it's kind of scary, and that's the kind of sketchy side of that whole thing.
I also really liked the Moore's Law video. I thought that it was really interesting that we keep increasing the amount of information that we can put on a small amount of space, and that's nice for us when we go to download 1,000 pictures, but it's also kind of scary because it does make it easier, as Mason said, to have that access for like hackers to get all of that access to a lot more information at one time. And so I just thought it was really interesting that something that can benefit us so much is also really harmful to us. And the PCAST article also talked a little bit about that, so I just found that really interesting.
I thought that the issue of privacy in general from Greenwald and then the privacy and big data paper were both really interesting, especially the paper when they talk about the expansion of privacy rights that have already been and how we're expanding them into the world of technology as technology grows, and the possible threats to our privacy in that way come up.
So good, you guys. Thank you so much for that rundown. Sounds like everybody found something that was interesting to them. Yeah, and I just wanted to comment really quickly on the informed consent aspect and the 12-page medical release you may be signing. And so both the Mauritius Declaration and the PCAST article brought this up in asking, and they both kind of asked this in an interesting way. They said, where should the burden be when you're doing informed consent? Should the burden be on the organization that is asking you to give consent to make it more readable, or should the burden be on you as the participant to actually take the responsibility and read through the whole thing? And so I just wanted to see, what do you guys think? Green checks if you think it should be on. If it should be on the company that's asking for it, if they should have the responsibility to make it more readable and more accessible. Or if you think that, red X's if you think that it should be on the person participating to take responsibility. Okay, interesting. So a lot of folks think it should be the organization. A couple folks think it should be us. I'm not sure if we have the colors for both. Yeah, I think I would have to agree with you, Christina. Ideally, there would be a shared responsibility there. And what I wanted to point out that I thought was extra interesting is that the Mauritius Declaration and PCAST both made it clear that they felt that the burden should be on the organization to make informed consent more accessible and less of that 12-page extensive consent form that nobody reads. So just a quick thought there. All right, so we're going to keep discussing privacy and big data throughout this class, and then we're going to talk a little bit about presentations and the format for your next presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Cindy for the next discussion point.
All right, thanks, Lisa, and thanks everybody for your comments. I'm glad that you found things that were sort of interesting to you. And so because much of this week had to do with different aspects of your personal privacy and different ways that big data is starting to encroach in upon that, I wanted to ask a couple questions about the Glenn Greenwald talk. He makes a comment in his talk where he says, well, you know, if whatever you were doing you got caught, maybe you shouldn't have been doing it anyway. And it's really only sort of bad people that get caught and not good people. And so I'm kind of curious. So a couple of different questions. One, has your perspective about privacy been challenged at all by the Glenn Greenwald presentation? Did you come into it? I mean, I certainly went into that presentation and even this whole unit thinking that, well, yeah, whatever. I'm not doing anything that I care that somebody else knows about, and so it's fine. Did anybody else sort of share that perspective maybe before watching the video? And does anybody still have that perspective? And yeah, just sort of curious. Go ahead, Christina.
Oh, I was just going to say, I will admit I completely felt that way. Before hearing him talk, you know, I was like, oh, well, you know, I don't do anything bad. You know, let him catch all of the bad guys, you know, and they can search everything. But then listening to him, I realized, you know, it isn't, he's right. It's not just that, it's not just the bad people. There could be problems with entrapment, or, you know, it just doesn't. We don't deserve to have all of our lives just spread out on the internet and for anybody to look. I kind of came away at the end with like, well, maybe I need to just find a cave somewhere and get rid of all of this electronics. We're getting really, really dependent on it anymore. No caves, right? That is hilarious. Just go hide somewhere. Brittany, what were your perspectives?
I had the same thing, like going into it thinking, you know, or I guess when he first made the comment, like, oh, I don't have anything to hide, whatever, you know, I don't care what people know or, you know, see about me or whatever. And then he said that he told people, he was like, well, here's my email address, and you know, send me all your passwords and information and just let me, you know, read up on you or whatever. And then that hit home. I was like, you know, maybe I do really, you know, like my personal privacy, and that extends further out than just like, oh, if you're not a bad person, you don't do bad things. Like that, it encompasses so much more.
That's exactly how I wound up sort of feeling about things as well, because, and I particularly thought of if somebody's watching, and so I'm going to turn it over to Lisa because Lisa has a couple of comments about if somebody's watching you.
So I just wanted to bring up this point from his talk that I really enjoyed, and he talks about a couple of different theories of surveillance and behavior, right? And one that he brings up is the panopticon, which was an idea that Jeremy Bentham came up with, and it has to do with surveillance. Has anybody heard of the panopticon before, or have you studied it all? Any of the writings by Michel Foucault? He had a theory on this as well. He took it one step further. Okay. So I thought I'd try and draw out a panopticon for you, just in case you haven't actually come across this idea before. So bear with me. Let's see if I can actually make it work. Yes, prison tower scenario. Exactly. That's it, Christina. So the idea is, let's see if I can get my... So the idea is that you have a tower, right? So there's my tower. And this tower sits in the center of a prison. And so I'm going to make this prison actually circular, which is not how most prisons are, but just stay with me. So there's my circular prison, and I'm going to divide this prison up into cells, right? And so each of these cells has somebody in it. And the idea is, with the panopticon, that you have somebody standing in this tower, and they can see into each one of these cells at all times if they want to. Thanks. So you've got somebody looking at you, and you've got people hanging out in these cells. And what's interesting about the panopticon idea is that all that needs to happen is for somebody in this cell to think that they could be watched. So the person doesn't even have to be standing in the center of the tower to change behavior. And so what Glenn Greenwald's talking about is that even thinking that we could be watched changes how we behave. And that was the whole idea of the panopticon, was you could build this prison structure so that even if you didn't have a guard station in the tower, the prisoners wouldn't know whether there was somebody there or not, but they knew that they could be observed no matter any time of day, right? And so it would change, they would modify their behavior, because if they were caught doing something naughty, then they could be punished for it. And so Michel Foucault is a French theorist in the 1980s, and he takes this a little bit further, because he says, well, think about all the institutions that are set up this way, where as long as we think somebody can see us and can observe us doing something wrong, we change our behavior patterns. Or even, not even surveying us, seeing us do something wrong, but something that we could be disciplined for, we could be punished for. And that changes our behaviors. And an interesting thing he brought up was there's lots of institutions like this, including schools. The way that we have a teacher at the front of the classroom watching all of the students at one time. So he wrote a very influential article called Discipline and Punish. And I wanted to bring that up here because, to me, the Greenwald video really had a lot to do with, it's not just whether or not you're doing something bad, it's that your behavior, you change your own behavior if you think that you're being watched. And so, yes, Anna, he knows when you're sleeping, right? And so, of course, lots of films and books have taken advantage of this, and there's all sorts of the, kind of the big brother idea out there. And so I just wanted to put that connection out there in case you haven't come across this before. You may at some point in your academic future. Yeah, question. How many of you have read 1984? Green checks if you have. Do you see the connection here with the panopticon and the idea that even thinking that we might be watched changes our behavior? So what was the big deal about that in the Greenwald video? Why was he concerned? Go ahead and take the mic if you have an idea. All right, so I'll make the point that he's concerned about this because in his idea, it's not just about whether an individual is thinking about, well, I'm doing something wrong or I'm doing something I don't want anybody else to see, but it's the idea that governments or large organizations have a different view of that, right? And so for them, doing something wrong or doing something they don't like could be simply having an alternate viewpoint. So if you are living in a country, go ahead, Cindy.
I was going to say, and now that we can be watched all the time and all of that can be stored, which is why we put the data storage piece in as well, that somebody can go back 5 years and say, well, what was Brooke doing 5 years ago on this day? Was she at her house like she said she was? And so it takes the panopticon to from what I would think is to the nth degree almost.
Right, and so yeah, exactly. So if you live in a place and you are a protester in the Ukraine, and your social media presence kind of gives this away, it puts you at a greater risk, right? And so this is a much bigger issue than whether an individual is doing something that they feel they should share or shouldn't share with the rest of the world. All right, that's enough of me on my soapbox. So we've got a fun class ahead, and I was going to turn it over to Cindy for the next section.
Okay, so just a little bit of information about analytics, and I know we've read some this week on it, and I just wanted to point out a few things. So analytics really is in the whole scheme of big data. Right now we have a scale of collection that we've never seen before. We can collect so much more information. And the scale of analysis can be that much better because our computers are getting that much more powerful, all due to Moore's law. And interestingly, we as a society, and you guys can tell me if you think that this is true or not, but we as a society, once our computer can do something, we don't really think of it as all that special. And so I'm gonna give some examples here, and I'm just gonna ask for each of you to sort of chime in. So how many of you think it's totally normal that your computer can do this, that it can scan through your pictures and it can say, oh, is this Cindy? And 9 times out of 10, or maybe 3 times out of 4, it actually is right. So this is me, and this is me, and this is me. And it happened to guess that this little girl Fiona was me, right? Facebook knows who to tag, exactly. So how many people now think that this is just, you know, it's something computers do. It's totally normal and reasonable that computers should be able to do this. And then how many are freaked out by it or think it's just crazy cool that computers can do it? And go ahead, and I'll go off the mic for just a sec if anybody wants to share. Go ahead, Sari.
I mean, I think it's pretty normal that it can pick out your face, and especially like Facebook, tag you in a picture and know that it's you, but it's also really kind of creepy because a computer should not know that, I feel like. But I mean, it's expected now.
I would agree that it's starting to become more and more expected. And this is one of the types of analytics, right? You have this big data set, and because computers are so much more powerful and they can pull all that information, this is a type of analytics. Another type of analytics that I'll talk about more a little bit later has to do with spam detection, right? And the ability for a program to run in the background on your email and know that that email really isn't meant for you. Whereas when we all first got email, that spam filtering didn't occur, and now we sort of expect that we shouldn't get all that spam. It should go into our spam box. And finally, this last example is, well, you could actually look at this example from multiple different perspectives. What do you guys think? Go ahead and type into the instant message box. What do you think that woman is doing with her phone in her cabinet? Inventory, I hadn't thought about that, Kate. Funny. Good, yeah. And a lot of people do think, you know, checking ingredients or calorie counting. And actually, the really cool thing about this is that because of all of those apps that we have that allow us to calorie count, where you can just use your phone to scan the barcode, that the device she's using, just her phone, and the app that she has on it, she's blind, and it's telling her what each of these different ingredients or what each of these different cans is in her cupboard, right? And so again, it is taking large data sets that are readily available. All the people that sell us these products in the grocery store are willing to put a barcode on it, and then using our computing power, our analytical. Yay, big data, right. Yeah, using our analytical power to be able to make life a little bit easier for those with some disabilities, right? So we just sort of wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that, an artificial intelligence researcher, his name is Rodney Brooks, he complains that every time we figure out a piece of how to do something a little bit cooler in analytics, that it stops being magical and we say, oh, that's just some basic computation. And yet in the creation of it, it really was a much bigger thing. So just some thoughts. Which brings up the fact that if we are analyzing all of these data, are we looking for correlation? Can we say anything about causation? And sort of what is this about? So I put up these two pictures to say that, just to give you a couple of facts. More than 98% of convicted felons are also bread eaters. Fully half of all children who grow up in bread-consuming households score below average on standardized tests. More than 90% of violent crimes are committed within 24 hours of eating bread. Any thoughts about whether eating bread causes any of these things? Right, maybe we all need to stop eating bread, but it points out that you can find correlations if you look for them. And it does not mean that just because two pieces of information have a high correlation that one caused the other. Yes, great, Brittany. That's a perfect example, exactly. Everybody who eats a carrot dies at some point, and so, well, eating carrots must cause people to die. And so somebody else had another comment. I got to move my little chat box. Yes, most people in jail have gone to most people that are in jail are right-handed. That is true. Most people who are in jail are right-handed. Okay. So let's see, I want to say one other thing. So if you're new to the idea of thinking about correlation and causation in big data, right, causality means that A causes B, whereas correlation is simply that A and B can be observed at the same time, that those two things are connected or related. However, when we start talking big data, things get pretty different because sometimes it's good enough. It's what people who are starting to do the analytics on this, they're starting to find that correlation might be good enough when it comes to answering certain types of questions. You guys have really good examples of correlations. Okay. So, for example, if you are, let's say, Target or you're Walmart or you're some big company, and you want to increase your profit margins, then finding patterns or finding correlations might be enough. Meaning, and so I'm going to give an example. So if you know that every time, let's see, let me rephrase. I'm just going to tell you the Target story because the Target story is really interesting. So Target was interested in being able to send coupons, and you're going to see a documentary about this week called The Human Face of Big Data. But Target was interested in sending out coupons to its customers. And it wanted to target those coupons to people in a very timely manner. So you have your Target swipe card. How many of you have a Target swipe card or a Fred Meyer's card or a Safeway card? Green checks if you've got a card that you swipe or that you type in your phone number when you're at the register. All right, which means that all of your purchases are being tracked, both like the date, the time, and from a person coming in to do the analytics on this and to be looking for patterns in the big data. They studied out details to find out when you're buying different things and what you need, and also connecting it to things such as baby registries, right? And so now they have some information. If you registered for a baby registry, what are your shopping patterns like? And one of the things that they noticed, this guy, his name is, I'll give you his name, hold on, I wrote it down so that I could tell you his name. It's on the next page. Shoot, where did I lost his? I thought I wrote his name down. Oh no, his name is Pohl. His last name is Pohl. So they find out that people who are pregnant switch from having scented lotion, from buying scented lotions at the grocery store to buying unscented lotion. Not everybody, but a large enough subset of their data. So they know that the people are pregnant, right, because they registered for the baby registry, and then they comb through all of the, right, because they're sensitive to smells, right? So they comb through all of this information about what they bought in all of the months leading up to the pregnancy, and then they look for those patterns of shopping and send out coupons to people based on their pattern of shopping. Does that make sense to you guys? That like, okay, so they figure out, it would be similar to them figuring out that everybody buys, corned beef and cabbage around St. Patrick's Day, but it's much more individual than that. Does that make sense? Green checks if that makes sense. Red X's if it doesn't. And how about the blue confused face if you weren't paying attention? Because that's okay too. Okay. So this has worked out really well for Target. for the most part, because they have been able to send targeted coupons and ads to different households based on what's going on in their lives, and they've used it for wedding registries and all sorts of things. However, it gets a little creepy when you talk about it on the individual level. So, a person who works, a manager got a call from a man, and this is a true story, and it went to court and everything. Well, did it go to court? I don't know if it went to court, but anyway. My daughter got this in the mail. He said, she's still in high school and you're sending her coupons for baby clothes and cribs. Are you trying to encourage her to get pregnant? And so a father calls in really upset because he thinks that Target is trying to encourage his daughter to get pregnant. And the manager really didn't have any idea what the man was talking about. He looked at the mailer, and it was addressed to the man's daughter, contained advertised for maternity clothing, nursery furniture, pictures of smiling infants. The manager apologized and then called the man back a few days later to apologize again, and the father was somewhat embarrassed because he said, I had a talk with my daughter, and it turns out that there have been some activities in my house that I hadn't been completely aware of, and she's due in August. So, so Target had figured out that his daughter, who was still in high school, was pregnant based on her shopping patterns because they had all the information from everybody else, right? So it's just one of those things. These were correlations. People who register for our baby registry, these are the patterns of their buying. And so now we can say with some certainty, if we see that pattern in somebody's shopping, that they might be pregnant. Let's go ahead and send them coupons. Okay, one last little thing about this. Now what they do, and this is really funny, I just think this is hilarious. So now in order to not creep people out, because a lot of people get sort of, true, good point, Lisa, but unscented lotion does not cause pregnancy. It is still just a correlation. So the last little piece that's kind of cool that came out of this, so this was enough of a concern, and a lot of people got pretty upset because they felt that it was a violation of their privacy. So Target is still doing this because it's technically legal, but now when they send you the coupons, they'll send you the little circular or the little thing that comes in your mail will actually have like diapers, a coupon for diapers next to a coupon for, let's say, a lawnmower, and so that you don't feel as targeted. They're still targeting you. You just don't feel as bad. And so all they did was just they just slapped random things together. Okay. Any thoughts about this? And I'll move on if there's no thoughts, but I'll take off the mic. Yeah, it is not just Target that's doing it. Everybody who has one of those cards, anybody who has a card that's tracking individual purchases, they're doing the same thing. I know, I do too. I do too, Christine. It might have just been the lotion that she bought. Okay, so this brings up the idea of false positives and false negatives. And so everybody get ready to type your name on the whiteboard. And so a false positive is a result that indicates a given condition is present when it is not. So for example, you're not actually pregnant, but the test tells you that you are. Or a false negative is a result that indicates that a given condition is not present when it indeed is, meaning you're actually pregnant, but you take a pregnancy test and it tells you that you're not. Yes, she was a teen. Okay, so what do you guys think? So everybody type your name under whether you think it's worse to be a sort of a victim of a false positive or worse to be a victim of a false negative. And again, a false positive is you're not actually pregnant, but the test tells you that you are. And a false negative is that you're actually pregnant, but the test tells you that you're not. Okay. And would anybody like to defend why they say what they're saying? Go ahead, Lauren.
I guess just in general, like, if you feel like you're taking a pregnancy test, it must be because there's a reason you think you're pregnant. So if you get a negative, you might go on life assuming that, oh, it's something else. You could go out and do something that might be harmful, whereas if you had gotten a positive, you could have gotten to the doctor immediately instead of, I guess, being tricked, kind of.
Well put. Kelsey?
I was kind of thinking of just not just a pregnancy, but like a false negative. I was thinking of like some kind of disease, like I don't know if it was cancer and you found out that it was negative and then it really wasn't negative. I think that would just be worse to me than a false positive.
Yeah, good point. Yes, exactly. It might not change anything about your habits. All right, now let's talk about it related to your inbox. So in this case, a false positive is a legitimate email was wrongly identified as spam. So something that was important in your workflow went into your spam box. Or a false negative is that a spam email actually shows up in your inbox instead of going into spam. And so in this case, go ahead and write your name under which one you think is worse again. So false positive is a legitimate email that was wrongly identified and made it into your spam box. Or a false negative is a spam email that was not identified as spam and it happened to make it into your inbox. Go ahead, Mason.
I think it's a lot easier to delete an unwanted email in your regular inbox than to realize 3 months down the road that some very important email was just sitting there unnoticed.
Great point. Brittany?
Yeah, kind of on the same lines as Mason, only I was thinking I see the false negative. I can see it's right there. I can see the spam email in my regular inbox, but the important email in my spam box is like out of sight, out of mind. I don't know it's there. I don't look for it. It's not in front of my face.
Absolutely, exactly. And Kelsey, go ahead.
Yeah, just like Mason was saying, that just happened to me where a really important email got put in my spam box. So now I'm in the habit of checking that all the time, just so that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, it could really mess some things up. And Lisa shared that she had an intern's application go into her spam box at one point. So somebody was applying for a job, it went into a spam box. So, okay, the reason that the reason that we brought up these two cases and the idea of false positives and false negatives is because it really does matter exactly what the circumstance is. And in the case of big data and all the analytics that are coming along with it, there are going to be a lot of different types of false positives and false negatives that are correlated together or that are determined about somebody. And so it's just time for us to sort of think about that the computers, that this is going to happen, right? Because it's an algorithm that runs and it's not always going to be correct. For example, I'll just go back a couple slides. This is not actually a picture of me. Okay, so it's not correct, and this doesn't really harm me in any way, but it could if depending on the circumstance. And so it's just remembering to think about the circumstance, and it does matter, and sometimes false positives are worse than false negatives. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa.
Okay, so we're going to spend 2 slides just doing a little bit of science, technology, and culture analysis. And so to go back to expectations of privacy, I wanted to read you this quote from the PCAST article. And they say, new privacy rights usually don't come into being as academic abstractions. Rather, they arise when technology encroaches on widely shared values. And so this to me is a real clear place where technology and culture and society overlap. And I wanted to ask you, think about a little bit about the history of our rights, and I'm putting that in air quotes, our rights to privacy. What were some of the other technologies out there that people felt violated their privacy? And think back to the turn of the 20th century. Go ahead and grab the mic if you remember. Okay, I thought somebody was going to grab the mic there. So I see Kelsey says newspapers, and Alicia says television. And yeah, actually going back to turn of the century, there was this real feeling that photography was becoming, and newspapers were becoming, this huge invasion of personal privacy, right? Radios, television. So as we go through each new technology, it seems to be that as a society we experience this feeling that our personal activities or our personal thoughts are being exposed on a new scale to other people, and we may not have a whole lot of control over who gets to see that information or who gets to hear about our private lives. And so I wanted to ask for just a minute to think about some of the things when you expect privacy. Let's think about it in terms of both culture and society. What are the cultural aspects to expecting privacy? What would you say? I'm going to take my mic off. Okay, just as a quick little prompt. So culture, remember, is going to talk about our shared beliefs and our shared norms and our values, and society is going to be more of the institutional aspects, so the legal framework. So if I'm thinking about the culture of privacy, what are some of the cultural norms that we have in the United States? What do we expect when it comes to our privacy? Okay, that's a good one, Christina. So we expect that our homes are our own, I think they use the term our castles, right? And so those should be free from invasion of outside resources of people we don't want in or people we don't want to invade our homes. Okay, we can't tap our phones. So our phone conversation, we think our phone conversations should be private. What else do we value in terms of privacy? Mail, yeah, and I love that. In the PCAST article, they were talking about how in the first days of mail, it was normal for posted mail to be opened on its way across the country. That was a normal thing until we decided to make a law about it and make that illegal. Brent, what do you mean by finance?
I just mean like bank documents and bank information. Yeah, Brooke. Yeah.
Okay, great. Medical information. Right. So there's kind of an interesting statement here that that when it comes to these are our values, right? We think that we should have control over this information about ourselves, and that it should be our choice in where we share this information. When it comes to the actual social framework, right? When it comes to what's legal and illegal, we have this transfer, right? So we say, this is what we believe. We believe that this should be our right. So how do we translate that into a law? Any ideas? What are some instances of laws that we've created to protect privacy? Great, so HIP is a good example. Any others you can think of? Go ahead, Brooke.
Well, I don't know if it's more along the lines of privacy, but I just kind of think of the Miranda rights, kind of when like someone gets arrested and they have to, be said their rights and everything to attorney, lawyer, that kind of stuff. But it's not really privacy, but it's kind of just a thing where something happened, so we made a law of it to prevent future occurrences like that happening.
Right, and actually that does come under the idea that you have a right to keep secrets. And so they're kind of giving you that warning when they read you your Miranda rights. You do have the right to keep a secret up to a certain point, I would say. How about rights of What about negative consequences that could happen? What if you were discriminated against in getting maybe you were applying to the federal government, right? And you find out you were discriminated because of your religious belief or because of your genome even. Maybe we go into the future a little bit. Right, so FERPA, Federal Education Right Privacy Act. Wow, that's kind of a mouthful. Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting thing to think about. So we have these shared values. We feel that we have a right to privacy. That's something we've all agreed on as a culture. We feel we have this right, and then we want that codified into some kind of a law that's actually going to protect that right. All right, so I'm going to move to the next one. We're going to do one more little example here. And so remember when we talked about my poor dog's eyeball, and we thought about the different things, different aspects of science, technology, and culture. We're going to do that with another example here. Oops, I apologize. That graphic is not very good. I just pulled it off the website, and I didn't look closely enough. Okay, so if you remember from the PCAST article, they gave several examples of data collection and analytics projects that are already happening. And one of the examples they gave was the Durkheim project. And I'm going to give you a short description of the project, and then I'm going to ask you to tell me what are the different aspects of science, technology, and culture and or society. And so the idea behind this project, it's a research project, and it is asking veterans to volunteer, to opt in, for their social media to be monitored and be uploaded into a medical database. And that medical database includes results from a VA suicide study and from lots of other, involves linguistics and behavioral science and quite a bit of other databases. And so what they're looking to do is to data mine and then correlate and assess an individual's risk for suicide based on their social media content and use. It's a pretty interesting and bold project, I would say. And so the whole idea is that you've got this large data set that's automatically, it's always pulling information from all of the devices that you use in social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or Google+. And it is matching that up. It's running all kinds of analytics based on the linguistics and behavioral science that says, well, from this set of, we can think that from this set of words that are used, this person may have suicidal thoughts or may have a higher risk for harmful behaviors. And so then this analytics gets correlated back out and assigned to an individual, and it gets monitored in real time. So this is constantly it's happening in real time, and then it gets reviewed by clinicians, and they're able to get in touch with you and maybe just say, hey, I'm just checking in. Looks like maybe you're having a hard time, or maybe you want to come in and talk to me about this. And so it's kind of an ongoing research study that's out there as a pilot. And so I'm going to ask you, what are some of the cases of science that are involved in this particular example? What would you say? Go ahead and grab the mic. Okay, I'm going to ask people, raise your hands and then speak. And think about the science. What's the science behind being able to determine if somebody has a suicidal thought? There could be lots of different answers you can give here. Go ahead and raise your hand.
Sorry, I pushed the microphone before I raised my hand. But could just the way that they're talking, like the things that they're saying, could that be like scientifically related to if they have suicidal thoughts?
I think it could. So what they're saying is that they have a huge database, and part of that database is a linguistic database, and the linguistics is coming from, lots and lots and lots of research studies of behavioral science that have said, okay, in this situation, somebody had a harmful behavior that was associated. Here's some of the language they used that was associated with the harmful behavior. So yeah, absolutely. What other aspects of science can you think about in this situation? And Cindy, feel free to jump in.
I guess I would just say that I'll just touch on what Syria was saying. So there does have to be all of that study behind knowing which words and which pieces before you could ever feed it into, right? So you need to build those databases. So what else needs to be built? What else do we need to know about suicide? What else needed to be studied prior to being able to use a tool like this? I guess that's kind of the way we're trying to think about this, is what else had to be studied? What else did we need to collect information on?
So interesting. I mean, I think I can see, Brooke, you might be connecting it to some of the other data analytics. Just think about some of the information that had to go into this database, right? So medical history, great, Kate. What's part of their medical history, or what is common in a medical history for suicide cases, right? We have to have some kind of understanding of depression. I think I would qualify that as a science. I mean, it's part art, of course, but we do have a scientific study of depression. Good. Okay, Christina, so it's an interesting comment. This seems almost too opinion-based. Because someone types something negative, does that have to mean they're suicidal? I would say that would be kind of a causation result that you're drawing there, whereas it may be that it's not just something negative that they type, but maybe it's the number of times that they type something negative, or maybe it's the fact that they've typed something negative, 6 times in 3 days, and that also correlates with something else that this database is looking for. All right, so we've got a couple ideas of the science that's going into this. What about the technology aspects? And go ahead and think broadly. Raise your hand. Go ahead, Marissa.
I think one thing that you can definitely look at is technologically is the websites that they've visited, or searches they've made, like things like that. I think that would be a pattern that you could study.
Okay, so the ability to collect information because they're using a device that's connected to the internet. So that's one aspect of technology. What about, go ahead, Alicia.
Where they're storing it and how they're sorting it, and the whole process of analyzing the data is going through technology.
Yeah, exactly. So there's the technology of the database, and then there's also the technology that's kind of amazing to me, is they're using machine learning. They're using almost artificial intelligence to go through and do the analytics. What about other aspects of technology? Okay, I like that, Kelsey. Real-time monitoring. So it's got to be processed so quickly that it happens in real time. What about some of the aspects that we've just been talking about in terms of privacy and technology? What can you imagine might happen to this database of information? Okay, so that's a good point, Lauren. So they've got to collect more and more and more information. The more information you have, the more accurate the database could be. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the culture and society aspect of this. What are your thoughts? What are some of the cultural and societal aspects? Go ahead, Christina.
Well, again, I just think this sounds so invasive. I mean, you mentioned that it's voluntary at the beginning, and I guess that would be a good thing, since maybe just volunteering for a project like this shows that you're at least concerned that you might have an issue with suicidal thoughts or depression, but my question is, how is this different, other than the subject matter, from like the Target story where they're finding out what people are buying and then targeting those people with it? It almost seems like the same thing to me. They're monitoring the things that they're saying and doing and posting and then targeting whether or not they're suicidal or not.
So that's a great question, Christina. I wanted to jump in, and so Lisa, you can cut me off if you'd like. So for something like this, they're basing. So they take all of the so psychologists and people and social scientists and medical doctors are out there actually studying depression and suicide in our different communities and wanting to know. And this is specifically for veterans' health. And so we really want to know why with veterans there might be a higher rate of suicide. So it has been studied for years now, right? And so they are taking all of that scientific knowledge, building an analytical tool to be able to help identify if somebody might be at risk. So their medical professional can then contact them. So versus Target that just plain went into their big huge database and looked for patterns. This one's actually based on medical studies and psychological studies that have been done for years and to help build it. Does that help differentiate the two? Yeah, morally I think it might, but I don't know, I have to think about it some more. It still seems kind of invasive, but.
Yeah, I think it could be. And so one of the cultural questions I'll ask, and I'm going to call on Kelsey here in just a minute, but I would say what are the cultural assumptions or values that you see coming out in a study like this? And Kelsey, go ahead and take the mic, and then I'll see if anybody else wants to tackle that question.
Well, you kind of already touched on this, but I was going to say like the cultural aspect of knowing that veterans have a higher suicide rate and are at risk for that, and then also the social or the cultural aspect of social media use. That's another cultural thing I thought of.
Great, yeah. Our actual social media use is both a technology and a culture. Absolutely, yeah. And I'm really glad that you brought up the specific group of people being identified as having a higher risk, because that is very much a cultural or societal aspect of this case. What else? What does this reveal about us as a culture, as a society? So I'm just going to point out the obvious one, which is that we as a culture assume that suicide is not a great thing and that we want to try and prevent it. And so this is a cultural norm, right, that we're making, but then we're also, as a society, we're trying to put a structure into place to support and to prevent suicide from happening. All right. Christina, what's cultural norm online presence? Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Oh, I just meant that it seems to be part of our culture now that we're online a lot more. Since they're doing this test, it sounded this data they're gathering mostly from online or internet accesses, like you were saying, Twitter and Facebook, and I think you said Google Plus too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, any questions on this case study? I had a few more things I wanted to ask you about. And to go along with this, I would say, what are some of the pros and cons of having this information attached to your identity? So I'm going to ask for both. What's a potential pro? If you're participating in this study and you volunteered for it, so you're interested, what are the pros and cons? Go ahead, Alicia.
I just had a con in that we also have a kind of a social stigma attached to things like depression and suicidal behaviors, and so I think in that aspect it could be negative.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. And when Cindy and I were discussing this, that's exactly what we thought of as well, that there is a cultural and social stigma to this. I'm going to read this other comment. Con, pro, find out you are or not suicidal. Yeah, it's probably not an either or, right? It's more of you're given kind of a risk rating, and it might help you determine some of the proactive things that you can do, right? And so the con is perhaps can be found out and turned down for certain jobs because of a mental health issue. And that's exactly what we were hoping that you guys would bring up. So obviously this data is going to be very protected, and I'm sure the consent form is meant to protect individual rights, and this is because it involves medical records, right? It's going to be a very secure system. But what are some of the issues that were brought up this week about having anonymous medical records, and what could happen in the future with big data and with all these data sets floating around? What could happen with your identity being attached to this particular information? Right, Kelsey. So there's the concern that you could be able to identify individuals, even using all of the data that is available about them online, even if it's part of another data set, because we're able to run such sophisticated analytics. And if it, right, good point, Alicia, if it's stored indefinitely, it might not always be private. So storage is another issue, right? What happens if this information is stored for 50 years? Can we ensure that it'll be private? Yeah, I agree, Sergey. And then people can view this information as a label, right? So I think those are all really good points about the con side. Anything else you want to say about the pro side of this?
I would like to point out, like if I were a medical professional, if I were a psychological health medical professional, I think I would absolutely love the idea that my patients, if they opted in, that I would get real-time information and could potentially really do some more good for those patients, because certainly those people who are going into a depression are going to be less likely to reach out naturally on their own. So to have a tool that would allow for me as their mental health professional to reach out to them, and not just randomly reach out, but reach out at the right time, I think would be a really powerful thing.
Thanks, Cindy. Any other thoughts on this one before we move on?
Can I just ask how many people would sign themselves up for it? In green checks or red X's? I'm just kind of curious. All right. And then I'm going to clear those. How many of you know somebody in your life that you wish would sign themselves up for it because you're concerned about them? All right, thanks for that. I was just curious what you all were thinking. And I'm just going to share one quick story, and then I'll let Lisa go on. Sorry. I have a really good friend who was a good friend in graduate school, and she was suicidal. And if there were a tool like, and I know this is for vets and not for just everybody, but if there were a tool like this that could have helped us know, I mean, she has not committed suicide. She is still living, but she lives on her own. And I think she would probably love a tool like this to help her get the help that she needs, because she always sought help. But anyway, I'm just speaking on the positive side. So I know that there's a lot of negatives.
Thanks, Cindy. Yeah, and I would say that I see this on both a positive and negative side. I would have a hard time weighing this out in my mind, whether it's overall better or overall worse. But I think it's a pretty fascinating case study to think about all the different aspects. All right, thanks for participating in that. I'm going to go through briefly some aspects of your upcoming presentation. And so this presentation, we've done something a little bit different each time. And this one, we're asking you to do a persuasive presentation. And you're going to, that's why we have a pro and con sign up for each of these questions. And so you're going to be taking one point of view about the issue and persuading us about your point of view. Now, it doesn't have to be a point of view that you agree with in real life, but we're going to ask you to use a persuasive presentation style in how you present to us. All right. Thanks, Christina. I love this cartoon too. All right, so my gist of this one was, if it's worth talking about, it probably has multiple perspectives, and that's the case with all of the questions we have posed for you this next week. Okay, so when you're doing a persuasive presentation, can I get green checks? How many of you have done persuasive presentations or debates in the past? Great, excellent. So this is going to be mostly review, but I'm going to go ahead and go over it quickly anyhow. The goal, obviously, of a persuasive speech is that you are going to persuade us to do something. And so does anybody, when I say, when I'm finished speaking, I want my audience to blank, does that remind you of anything that you encounter as an educator, as a teacher? Does that sentence look familiar to you? Yes, thank you. It's a learning objective, teaching objective. Okay, same thing. So when you're writing a persuasive speech or when you're preparing for one, think about this as your purpose statement and fill in that blank. So you should all write one of these before going into your presentation and think about what is it that you want us to believe. Now this does have to be focused. It's not just the, I want my audience to agree with me that big data is a good thing. So it's got to be a pretty specific case example, and that's going to make your presentation more powerful. Now there's three aspects that usually go into persuasive rhetoric, right? And so you've got ethos, logos, and pathos. And a lot of times what you'll see in persuasive rhetoric is a lot of use of pathos, which is that emotion, right? So you're going to appeal to your audience's emotion because that's usually the quickest way to get them to agree with you. But since this is an academic presentation, we want you to use all three. And so ethos is having the credibility. You are going to be knowledgeable about your topic. You are going to be somebody we can trust. You're trustworthy. You are going to support it with logic. So you're going to have some really good supporting evidence and points. And you're also going to create something that's an emotional provocation for us. So something that is relevant to us. Why should we care? That's going to be the emotional aspect. And a lot of times when you look at how to build a persuasive speech, you'll be asked to use both emotion and logic in creating the body of your presentation. All right. So to just sum up that on preparation for this, you're going to want to know your topic. You're going to want to know both your side and the opposite side because there is, while this is not going to be a true debate, there will be a question and answer that is prepared by you and your partner. And they're going to go after a weak point in your argument, and you're going to go after a weak point in theirs. So know both sides. You're going to want to narrow your focus down. So today we're going to give you a specific prompt, but you and your partner are going to work to narrow that down to something you can talk about in 2 minutes. So it can be something that's pretty specific and narrow. And then you're going to write that purpose statement. That's going to help you out a lot. And this is just going to be my little cheat sheet for thinking about how to structure your persuasive speech. So this is kind of like your intro, body, and conclusion, but instead I'm going to call it hook, line, and sinker because that's what you want us to take. You want us to take your argument, hook, line, and sinker. So your hook should be your introduction. It should have a little bit of emotion. It can also use logic, and it should be, why should I care? Why should I care about what you're trying to persuade me about? The line of it is going to be the main part of your speech, and it's going to use evidence. It's going to use argument. It can also still use a little bit of that emotion, that storytelling to illustrate your argument. And then the sinker is going to be, what are you going to leave us with? What are you going to walk away? If you had to, drop the mic and walk off the stage, what are we going to remember from your presentation? So those are going to be the three main things to keep in mind. And then, of course, in the refutation or rebuttal, you're going to be thinking, what are the weaknesses in your argument? Because that could be what your opponent asks you about. You're also going to try and figure out what are the weaknesses in your opposition's argument, because that's what you want to ask them about. You want to, in fact, undermine either their credibility or their logic. Now, this doesn't have to be mean, but that's part of being a persuasive speaker in a debate style, is you're going to try and undermine what they are trying to persuade us about, right? All right. So here's the details on the assignment. And we'll go ahead and put this up in your breakout rooms. You will be working in a breakout room later on with your partner after we do the sign up for the pros and cons topics. And so here's what you'll be doing for your presentation. You're actually going to be working individually on creating the presentation. So you don't have to work with your partner beyond figuring out what it is that you're both going to be talking about on either side of the pro or con. You are going to be, this time, you're going to be allowed only one slide. Don't try and cram it with a bunch of text. It's just going to be the background slide that goes along with your presentation, and we're going to ask you to use Blackboard video function in giving your speech. So you're going to be on the screen for 2 minutes. You're going to be talking directly to us. You won't be using a visual aid because the visual aid is going to be your face and your expressions and your voice modulation. All right. So we are going to ask you, like I said, to emphasize a specific example. We want you to be precise and persuasive. And you're also going to be concise, because that 2 minutes is just super fast. What is Blackboard video? Oh, okay. It is, so do you see up in the top of the screen next to the talk button, there's the video option. So usually we just use the talk, we just use the audio, but we're going to ask you to use the video function for this presentation. This is going to be the only time in this class that you will be doing a live video for us. All right, has everybody used that before? Can you give me green checks if you've used the video function in Blackboard? All right. We may try and set up some kind of a practice session for you today, or before you go into the presentation next week, if you'd like to practice using this. Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, so next week, because we don't use video very often because it does lag more, it requires more bandwidth. So it will be extra important next week for you to try and not be on wireless, to be on a good, reliable computer with a good webcam, and to make sure that you're using the fastest speed internet you possibly can. Because not only will it be important for your presentation, but it'll be important for all of us who are watching you to be able to follow along with the video feed. All right, so components, yes, thank you. So, I mean, if you want to wear your pajamas, they better be darn professional looking pajamas for this. We are going to ask you to give a professional presentation here. So think about what you're wearing, think about your lighting, think about what is behind you, etc. And I can share with you that we had an absolutely fantastic session last semester in which somebody had an 8-foot-tall rotating Christmas tree behind them that was lighting up the whole time and changing colors, and it was a fantastic presentation, and the chat was just hysterical because it was all about the tree. Yes, it was distracting. I mean, we had so much fun with it, but I'm going to advise you kindly to limit the distractions behind you and to think about what the rest of us are going to be seeing. All right, so the other aspects of this, there will be a question period, so you will get 2 minutes in presenting your side, your partner will get 2 minutes in presenting their side, and then you each have one question to ask the opposing speaker. So you'll want to prepare that, and they will have 1 minute to respond. We will turn your microphone off after 1 minute, whether you're done or not. So I'm going to look through, I just want to check my notes and see if there's anything else I've forgotten. All right, so the next part of this, we're going to have you choose the topic you'd like to discuss. We're going to do a sign up for that. We'll have you go into your breakout rooms with your opposing side partner to figure out the specific example you want to discuss. And then we'll be working on that for the rest of the class. So I'm going to turn it over to Cindy now. And Cindy, if I forgot anything, please jump in on that.
No, I don't think you forgot anything. And so hopefully you all saw the announcement as you were coming into class today and you have been thinking about which topic you would like, or which pro or con and what have you. And so we are now going to go ahead and sign up. So Lisa will be typing your names. And I'll count like we've done in the past for you to raise your hands, for you to take, wait, don't raise your hands yet. Okay, that's fine, Mason. We'll plug you in where we need to plug you in. Okay, so are we ready? So all right, so 1, 2, 3, raise your hands. Okay, great. And we're going to go a little bit slow so that Lisa has time to type. So Saria, you are first, and leave your hand up until Lisa gets your name typed in.
Can I do the Blackboard Analytics, the comp side?
All right, go. Okay, Saria, you can take your hand down. Lindsay, you're up.
Could I do the should big data regarding health information be publicly available on the pro side?
Oh, wait, okay, so big data publicly available pro, Lindsay, just so that we're good. All right, so I'm waiting for it to show up. Okay, Brittany, you're up.
I'll take the other side of the big data regarding health information.
Thank you, Brittany. And Christina, you're next.
I think I would like to take genetic databases utilized to solve crimes pro.
All righty, genetic databases used to solve crime pro. That was Christina, great. Or you can take your hand down. Brent, you're next.
I'll take should data be kept indefinitely in storage farms pro.
All righty, and Lauren?
Could I take the, pro side of Blackboard Learn Analytics?
Great. Yep, Lauren's pro side of Blackboard Learn. Okay, great. And then Brooke, you're next. And Lauren, you can take your hand down.
Can I take the con side of should genetic databases be utilized to solve crimes?
Sure. All right. And now, so Brooke, you can take your hand down. And Kate, you're up. Which one would you like?
Can I take the should direct consumer genetic testing be available with medical health information on the con side?
Of course. All right. Thank you, Kate. And you can take, and Marissa, you're next.
Can we have con for should indigenous groups be targeted for their genomic details?
All righty, great. And so, and Brittany?
I'll take the pro side for indigenous groups.
Okay, fantastic. So Brittany's taken the pro side for that. And Audrey, you are up next. And Brittany, you can take your hand down.
I guess I'll take the con side to the data being kept indefinitely.
Great, thanks, Audrey. And Alicia?
I will take should direct consumer genetic testing be available with medical health information pro.
All right, perfect. And let's see, and Audrey, you can go ahead and take your hand down, and then Danielle, you're up next.
I'll take the pro side for should there be increased regulations regarding informed consent.
Great, and that means Kelsey, that means you'll take the con side of that one, or the other, oh, and Mason's here too. So so Kelsey, go ahead and tell us what you'd like. And so since we have an odd number, one person is going to get to choose some, like, to sort of double up. So so Kelsey, you can decide if you want to be a double upper, or you can let Mason be the person who doubles up.
I'll just do the con of increased regulations on informed consent.
Alrighty, and so Mason, you actually get a free-for-all in which you get to choose which piece you want to argue.
I think I will jump on the con side of Saria's question. Should instructors utilize Blackboard Learn Analytics?
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. All right, so now what's going to happen is that we're going to send you into your breakout rooms to be, and we'll give you the slide that we just were on, so you'll know which side you're on and everything. And you want to work with your pro and con sides, want to work together to determine sort of some well-paired examples, right? So that one person doesn't talk, so that your pro-con argument is nicely tied together, I guess is one way to say that. Is that clear, that you want to be, so you don't want to go totally off in different directions? So Brittany, I'm not quite sure what you mean by there. We have more, oh, that was before, okay. You want, so for example, what would be a good example? I mean, they're kind of set up so that they'll be relatively specific, but let's say, so Brent and Audrey, you guys are going to be talking about data being kept indefinitely in storage farms. You want to talk about different examples of that, right, and sort of pair them up nicely so that when you're giving your argument, there's going to be a pro and a con side. I don't know if that makes sense. I'll give a specific example. So maybe you say, maybe you're talking about medical data for an example, and so if you want to give a pro for that, then Audrey would give a con for medical data being kept indefinitely in storage farms. Or you talk, so you guys get to choose together what you think your strongest pros and cons will be, and then the other, so that the other person will know what to pro or con against. I don't know if that again. Sorry. Okay, so why don't you go into your breakout room, start working together. Lisa and I are here. Yes. There are some wonderful resources in developing and giving persuasive presentations in the weekly folder, so please do check them out. And there's some really cool, Lisa put together a series of West Wing talk, little bites. So you sort of can leave the session when you are done, but you do need to check in with me or Lisa before you both leave, so that we know that you guys have a direction that you're going in, and that you didn't just bail on your other person. And so maybe you even think a little bit about this when I'm finished speaking. I want my audience to, and obviously you're going to need to do a little bit of research and to make it a little bit better. And anyway, I'm going to send you to your breakout rooms. Or actually, I'm going to let you go into breakout rooms. I will create them now. So yes, Kelsey, you just need to call us into the room. And our presentations are next week, exactly, Christina.
Any other questions about the assignment while Cindy is creating the rooms? Go ahead, Brittany.
I just wanted a little more clarification on the one slide, because you said there was one slide, but then, actually I don't know which one you said it, but when you said that there is no visual aid, don't type a bunch, your face is your visual aid, so I guess I'm kind of confused on, are we putting anything on the one slide, or is it just like a placeholder while we talk, or do you just want like an image?
All right, so you can move yourselves into your breakout rooms now. So if Alicia and Kate are the first one, or Alicia and Kate are the first one, and so that means Brittany and Marissa, you go into room 2. Lindsay and Brittany, you go into room 3. Lauren, Siri, and Mason go into room 4. Christina and Brooke into room 5. Brent and Audrey into room 6. And Danielle and Kelsey into room 7.
Sorry, Lauren, I'm seeing you can't move yourself. Is that the problem?
Sorry, I just didn't know if you saw the chat. It looked like Audrey left. Yeah, I just can't move myself.
Okay, so I think you're in group 4. Oh, there you go. Oh, so I got a question about the one slide I think I'm going to put an announcement on later on because I thought I was talking and I realized I didn't have the microphone on.